Hello everyone, this is Nick Perry at Schaeffer's Investment Research with your chart slideshow for Friday, March 30th. Today I am back with my weekly check of the broad market indices. In last week's chart slideshow, we basically talked about the push above short-term resistance and the fact that I was basically saying we had some constructive action. In the SPX basically, we talked about breaking above this zone here. I said we'd pushed near overbought levels. We weren't quite there yet, but we were close enough, to be cognizant of it. And I said that, if we did see a pullback, you'd want to look at, this support here is the first layer, and then down here, again on the Dow chart, a little bit easier to see. Basically, these two zones, the top of that consolidation, the bottom of that consolidation, is really the, the short-term support levels to watch. So let's turn to this week's charts. So while we didn't hit official overbought territory, we still did see a pullback this week, and basically the SPX was up here last week, and now we're pushing in on this area right here. You look at the Dow, basically in that zone. Same thing on the comp, the RUT, which had been slightly different, slightly different pattern than the other three indices. As far as overall patterns, it's different, but in regard to short-term support here from that prior resistance, now holding. Clearing off the screen. In other words, basically, what we've got here is a situation where we had this big dip. We had some chop around here. We had the breakup, and now we're coming right back to test that area as support. Now, whether we hold there or not, it's hard to say. If we do break down there, let me clear that chart off again. If we do see a breakdown, basically those two levels that I talked about last week, those are really the ones to watch. But my overall takeaway from this week is that what we've seen this week isn't, I wouldn't call it scary, I wouldn't call it even all too significant. It's what you'd kind of expect to see. You've got a big plunge, we've got a consolidation, you see a pop out of that, and now you see sort of a drift lower. That's sort of, if you just think of it in terms of the emotional side of what people go through. We had this big drop. It was kind of scary. The drop, though, was fairly short-lived. I mean, in this case, it was just a couple of days where the real damage was done. And the rest of the time, it was sort of this chop down. We had this little fake-out breakdown right there. But we closed higher that day, at least closed off the lows. I don't know if we closed higher. We closed off the lows. And now we've seen a breakout, but you don't expect to see just an immediate jump back in. That's not the way. It takes time for people to get comfortable. And from a technical perspective, this is generally healthy. It's what you'd expect to see. You get a break above consolidation, and then you get a pullback. So it's not just a runaway buying frenzy, but a situation where you get a chance to see that people are getting comfortable. They're starting to step back in. Now the big question here is whether we actually do see the support hold. It's hard to say, but that's what I'm going to be watching in the next week. We've got this low down here is something to watch, but as far as next week goes, what I'm going to be keying on is the action right here to see how this holds up. In terms of the Dow and the comp, it's very similar to the SPX. You've got the initial support there, and you've got this secondary layer of support. That a break below that would be something I'd be a little bit more wary of. A break of this top support zone back into the consolidation. I mean, you'd like to see it hold above that, but a break doesn't really change the technical picture. And as far as the comp goes, that's pretty much the same thing. Turning to the RUT, we basically have a situation where it's back at support. That comes from this consolidation zone, this trading range basically that we saw in the last half of 2006, or the last part of 2006. And the RUT broke above it. It's pulled back to sort of test the top of that range. You'd like to see it hold above it, but again, a breakdown, I wouldn't consider it all too significant, a break into this, but it would be a break below that bottom end. That would be something that I would consider noteworthy. So, those are the levels I'm going to be watching in the coming week in the blog. If you're interested in that, stop on by and give me a shout, say hello. And other than that, have a great weekend.